Well, good morning everyone, thanks for coming along. And I'm talking about sea snakes, of course. Sea snakes are very like eels, and there's a lot of confusion with eels, and a lot of eels look rather like sea snakes. So I just wanted to point out that sea snakes are reptiles and they need to breathe air, whereas eels are fish and they remain under the water all the time. And altogether there are about 70 species of sea snakes around the world. And I want to say a few general things about sea snakes, and then I'm going to talk about the two that are found sometimes in New Zealand. So I'm starting off with the general stuff. Okay, well, sea snakes are not really found much in the Atlantic Ocean, but they're found all through the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, and they're mostly around Australia and Southeast Asia. And in the Straits of Malacca near Singapore alone, there is 24 species of sea snakes. So that's really where they mostly are concentrated. Now they've got various adaptations for their marine life. One of them is to have a paddle-shaped tail so that they can... Well, anyway, I'm going to be talking more about the paddle-shaped tail because I'll be taking a specimen out so you can see more closely. Anyway, paddle-shaped tail for swimming, and it's paddle-shaped up and down. They move the tail from side to side like a fish, not up and down like a whale or a dolphin. And another adaptation they have is that the nostrils seal to prevent water coming in between their breaths here, and you can see it's got a sort of a valve on it, so that after they've taken a breath and they're underwater, the nostril can seal over and prevent water getting in. So these are the adaptations for their marine life. Now they're all poisonous, and in snakes the reason for the poison is that it subdues the prey and or kills the prey and prevents them struggling and makes it easier for them to catch them and swallow them. And also, to some degree, once the venom has got inside the animal, it can begin to the digestion process. So that's another aspect. Also, it's a defense against predators if you're poisonous and can give a nasty bite in return. Okay, now here I've got a model of a land snake, but it's the same sort of principle for the poisonous sea snakes. So this is the head, and I'm just going to turn it around. And you can see that it's all cut away, and the venom gland, this is actually a viper from Europe. This is the venom gland in here behind the eye, lying under here. And what happens is when the snake bites down on something, there's a lot of squeezing going on around the back of the head, and so the venom is squeezed out and it follows along this duct and it goes down the fang. So the largest tooth here is the fang, the one at the front, and it's got a little groove on it so that the poison will travel down the duct and inside the tooth, inside the groove, and into the flesh of whatever's being bitten. Okay, the poisons inside snakes can attack the nerves, the muscles, the blood, or the kidneys of the prey, and sometimes there's a mixture of chemicals that are doing several of these things. And with the sea snakes, apparently it's mostly neurotoxins which are going to be attacking the nerves of the prey. Okay, now I want to talk about the two kinds of snakes, sea snakes, that we sometimes have in New Zealand. The first one is the banded sea krait, which has this very short, blunt snout. Now this is quite rare here. There's only 10 records in New Zealand. And I wasn't going to say very much about it, except that a couple of months ago, one of them was found in Devonport. So that made me think that I could make a bit more about it. So this is the sea krait. And you can see it's got this beautiful banding pattern. And this is a picture in a coral reef swimming around. And then they also come out on land as well. So they're truly amphibious. They spend a lot of their time around coral reefs, rocky shores and mangroves, but they will come ashore mostly to lay their eggs. And I should just say that, of course, the sea snakes are mostly tropical. And when I say that we have them in New Zealand, what's happening is that a few of them are straggling down on the currents and getting washed up on our beaches. So they're very much stragglers for us. They're not really, they don't breed here, so they're not a self-sustaining part of our groups of animals. But on the other hand, because they are coming here of their own accord, they are native animals nonetheless.
Can you export them from another country?
Sorry?
Can you export them from another country?
No, you can't. No, there's strong rules against importing and exporting of snakes to New Zealand. But these are living in the ocean, so they're coming here of their own accord.
And no one's bringing them from Australia or anything?
No.
That's what.
So you say they're native, you would regard this as a native?
Well, animals that come to New Zealand of their own accord, that are not assisted by humans to come here, are native animals. They might not be endemic animals, they might not be unique to New Zealand, but they're still native, as opposed to being introduced by humans deliberately. Okay, now land snakes have enlarged scales on their belly, which enables them, as they slither around, to get a greater grip on the soil. And the banded sea krait still has those large scales. And I've got it, this is a banded sea krait here, a large one, not from New Zealand, this is from the Pacific. And if you come up later on, you might even see it with your naked eye now. On the belly there are large scales, just like a land snake. And they're mostly active at night. Now, this was the one that was found in Devonport, this one here. So it was noticed at the naval base. One of the workmen there fished it out with a net. It was alive, it was in the water. And they rang Kelly Tarleton's and it was taken across there. And they tried to keep it alive, but unfortunately it died. And so then it was given to us at the museum. So that's it upon arrival. And then we had to preserve it for long-term preservation and put it into alcohol. And so that's the very same snake now, preserved long-term for our collection. Okay, now that was the yellow-bellied sea krait, which is the rare one. Now I want to talk about the yellow-bellied sea snake, which is the one that is much more common in New Zealand. And there have been several hundred records, and I've tallied up over recent years, and there's at least one report every year in Auckland. Either it's in the Herald or the local newspaper because someone's seen it, or it's brought into the museum, an average of one a year. So they're not an everyday thing, but on the other hand, they're pretty regular. And these have a very long snout, unlike the other one. And they also have, instead of having the bands around the body, they've got the dark top and a yellow belly, and they've got a lovely flat paddle-shaped tail with beautiful spots on it. You can come, this is one here, yellow-bellied sea snake, the head over here, and you can see the lovely tail at the bottom there. So you can come and have a look at these later on if you wish. Okay, now this species is actually thought to be the most widely distributed snake in the world, not just the widely distributed sea snake, but the most widely distributed snake of any kind, because it has this enormous distribution. So it's found on the Pacific coast of Central America, various parts of the Central Pacific Ocean, down to New Zealand as a straggler brought down by the currents that are flowing in this direction mostly from the coast of Australia. And then all around Australia, Southeast Asia, up to Japan, all around the Indian Ocean coastline. Very, very wide distribution. It's a weak swimmer, so it's carried by currents and it can't do anything much about it. So that's how when they're brought on the way to New Zealand, the water's getting cold, but it's too bad they can't really swim against it. And they live out at sea all the time. They never come ashore. They have no need to come ashore. They have retained their eggs so that they give birth to live young at sea. They don't need to come ashore in order to lay eggs. And they've even lost the large scales on the belly, which most snakes have, because they don't need to crawl on land. They have the same small scales on their back and sides as they do around the belly. And we'll show that in a moment when we get one out. The ones in New Zealand are mostly alive when they're found. but they're still in a pretty sick condition. Here's one that was found just west of Auckland in March of last year, washed up on the beach. Now they stop feeding when the sea temperature goes below 18 degrees, so that means that for most of the time New Zealand is completely unsuitable for them. And they never come ashore unless they're sick or they've been washed up by a storm. So the ones in New Zealand are all washed up, and so what's happening is they're hitting the cold water, they're not surviving, it's terrible for them, they can't really function, they can't fight against it or swim away, so they wash up on the shore, and that's when people find them. They're mostly still alive, but they're pretty well stunned by the cold, and they haven't got any future here. This is the distribution of records of the snake, looking back over records, and you can see that they're mostly found in the northern part of the country, Northland, and then into the Bay of Plenty, and there's very few records anywhere else in the North Island, and just one record in the South Island. And looking at the months they're found, they're very frequent when our seas are at their warmest in March, April and May, and then they drop right off, and then they're never found after the seas have become really cold. Well, how big do they get in New Zealand? I looked at the newspaper reports because very often they say, you know, the snake was found washed on the beach and it was 2 feet long or 3 feet long or whatever. And then also there are some in museum collections that I could actually go along and measure. So I collected data on 39, and they were all between 0.5 metre and 1 metre long. And that means they're all adults. There are no juveniles found in New Zealand because they would be, you know, anything from this big up to this big. So we're only getting the adults here. Now they've got very short fangs at the front of the mouth, and we're going to show that in a moment. And they're only about 1.5 millimetres long, whereas some sea snakes have fangs that can be up to 7 millimetres long. And the average venom yield is that. Now this figure here, LD50, this is the lethal dose for 50% of the mice in a sample. So it's a way of comparing toxicity between species. So with this yellow-bellied sea snake, you have to have 0.28 milligrams per kilogram in order to kill half the mice in the sample. Whereas there are other sea snakes where you're only going to need 0.4 of a milligram per kilogram. So you can see how it's not as poisonous as many of the sea snakes. Now it does bite if it's provoked, but that's only going to be in normal temperatures when it's warm and active. So in New Zealand, when the snakes are all very cold, they're going to be less likely to bite. And it is known to have killed humans before. Okay, now here's some more statistics. This is the number of people that could be killed by the average bite. So with our yellow-bellied sea snake, it's about half a person, maybe a child would be not very happy. The brown snake in Australia, this is a very common poisonous snake in eastern Australia, and that's average bite is going to have enough to kill a person. But then you look at a rattlesnake from the Mojave Desert, it can kill nearly 6 people with one bite. And the death adder in Australia, about 8 people. And then the king cobra, one of the legendary most poisonous of all snakes, can, in theory, kill 20 people with the amount of venom that comes from one bite. So in New Zealand, the risk from the sea snakes is very, very low. And it's interesting to look at Australia, where they have 38 species of sea snakes and not a single human death has been recorded. And really, where they're most likely to be a problem is in Southeast Asia, where you have fishermen that are with bare feet, fishing with nets, and they're in muddy estuaries where they can't see, there's no visibility. That's the sort of situation which is going to be high risk for sea snakes. Okay, well that's my PowerPoint presentation. Now I've just got 2 things to show before you go. And one of them is some bones that are taken from the skull of a sea snake. So this is one individual sea snake that we have skeletonized, and the bones unfortunately all fall apart in the skull because they're not tightly joined together. But I've picked out the bones that have the teeth on them, just so you can get an idea of they're fish eaters. The sea snakes eat fish. The yellow-bellied sea snake eats fish, so it has to have rows and rows of teeth, sharp, pointed teeth, in order to be able to latch onto fish. And so this shows you on the bone and this for scale is the tweezers. You can see the bones are not very big. The teeth are not very big, and one of those teeth, or a pair of those teeth, will be the venom, the venomous teeth, the fangs.
So these from one jaw? There's two parts?
Yeah, two from the top and two from the bottom. Yeah.
And how can you tell between the top jaw and the lower jaw?
Well, it's not easy to tell offhand. I'm not sure offhand. I suspect the ones with a bit at the end are from the bottom jaw, but I'd have to check up on that. I don't know.
Fantastic.
Okay, well those are just some little bones to give you an idea, but what we're going to do now is I've got a snake that I'm going to take out of the preservative and put it under here where we can see much more closely some of its features. So this is a dead snake from our collection. We've got a whole bucket full of these yellow-bellied sea snakes because we are frequently given them. And so I'm just going to put one under the visualizer, and that way we can arrange for you to have a closer look at the head and the tail. See if Rachel can zoom in on that. You can see the long pointed snout and the eye. And can you just get a glimpse of the teeth inside the lower jaw there? Okay. Well, if you zoom out, we'll have a look at the tail. Okay, now I'll just show you the tail of the animal. You see how it's like a paddle? It's flattened from side to side, and then it has that beautiful pattern of spots and blotches on it. And then if we look on the underside, see how the scales are small, just like the side of the body and just like the top. No difference whatsoever. And if you come and look at the other species in the jar, you'll see the enlarged scales on the bottom. Now, I've got a second one here which has its mouth open a bit more, so we'll have a look at that one now.
And Brian, I've got to ask, can some of you smell something wafting through the room? Yes. What's the smell that we can?
It's alcohol, ethanol. The snakes are preserved in ethanol for the long term. This is a bigger one. It's been preserved in a jar, which is why it's curled up. But it's got its mouth open. So what we can do now is... Yeah. So that gives you a better idea inside the mouth. Rows and rows of very sharp teeth so that it can grab a hold of fish.
Can you all see the teeth kind of popping out? Yeah. And Brian, there seems to be sort of a row here, a row here on the other side, and then one in the middle.
Well, there won't be 3 rows, there'll be 4.
4 rows, so there's another row tucked in.
Yeah, there must be another one in there somewhere.
How wide can it open?
Sorry?
Can it lock out the jaw as well and really open the mouth really wide? Or?
I guess it can open its mouth really wide, yes, perhaps to grab hold of fish and then wait for the venom to take effect and then swallow the fish.
It would be able to swallow fish that are bigger than their head, for example.
I'm not sure about that. It could be that certainly the skull falls apart, which suggests that the bones are not all joined together strongly. So it probably can, like land snakes, allow itself to swallow things bigger than its mouth. I'm not too sure. Right, okay. All right, any questions to finish off with?
Do the sea snakes, they're not amphibious like the kraits, is that right?
Sorry?
Are they amphibious as well, like the other species?
No, this one, the yellow-bellied sea snake, is mostly living in the open ocean.
Yeah.
So it has no reason whatsoever to come ashore because it can give birth to live young out at sea. It doesn't.
But does it have that adaptation to be able to survive on land?
No, I mean it can breathe on land, that's not a problem, but it can't move very well on land because it doesn't have those enlarged scales and it's not used to doing it. So no, it's not really adapted to being on land. Well, they live in the open ocean, but apparently they will congregate, and they often congregate around strands of debris that's floating in the ocean. So out in the ocean you'll have long strands, often kilometres long, of dead seaweed and bits of wood that is washed off from the land. And these sort of strand lines are where these snakes will live. Because out in the open ocean, the little fish also need cover, and they will go for these strand lines and try and hide and live in the strand lines. And that's where the snake is living, and it's going to have its source of prey there. So that's where they will find each other as well, in these strand lines. And I've also read that sometimes they will catch fish that have approached the snake for refuge. You know, they think that the snake is something safe, a piece of detritus, and the fish will swim up to get shelter, and it's a snake. And so now you're welcome to come forward and have a closer look at the specimens in the jar, but don't touch them, please. Just have a look.
Just before you move, just if we can please have a huge round of applause for Brian. Thank you very much, Brian. It's going to make me look more closely when I walk along our shores.